I think that we have a tendency to think about writing in the same way that we think about painting, as if you start with a blank page, a blank slate. You start with nothing, and you have to conjure an entire world just out of the ether. But that's not true. I think that a much more helpful analogy, especially for those of us who are world builders and dungeon masters, is sculpting. Hear me out. I'm going to drag this metaphor out for about 15 minutes, and by the end it's going to be completely past the breaking point. It's not going to make any sense. When you're crafting a world, especially for an interactive medium, you're not starting with nothing. You're starting with a block of marble, right? A zeitgeist, a cultural imagination. You're starting with the expectations of your players and their knowledge of genres and tropes, with every story that's ever been told and every experience that's ever been had, and you're trying to distill that down into something simpler. You're not starting with nothing. You're starting with everything. And I think that's why I am so averse to fluff. I think that's why I'm so utilitarian in my stories and my world building. A lot of that is some of the screenwriting tendencies that I have, where you're a lot more limited on time and every decision you make costs money. But when you're trying to build a story that doesn't have anything unnecessary, it's helpful to acknowledge that you're starting with everything. You're starting with this block of marble and trying to chisel it down into something recognizable. I tend to get a little preachy when genres and tropes come up. I think that they're absolutely our most useful tool as interactive storytellers, especially in the actual minutia of what being a dungeon master entails. If we're going to continue to drag out this horrible metaphor, which we are, tropes are like chisels. Tropes are like the different shapes that you can find within the block of marble, right? Some of them are rounded, some of them have corners. There's one that's a chainsaw. Don't know if you can tell. I have no idea how real sculpting works. Tropes allow you to quickly and easily shape out parts of the world, but more importantly, they define what's not in it. Let's say that you're going to build a city, right? You need to flesh out some metropolis for the next few sessions of your campaign. If you just say there's a city there and leave it at that and don't do any more prep work, you're setting yourself up for failure, right? And it's not because you have no ideas for what could be in the city. It's because you have too many. It's because when all you say is there is a city here, there are so many things that exist in so many different kinds of cities that your players' minds, your audience's mind, your mind are just going to be so full that it feels like there's nothing. It feels like this weird, murky void. So, what you need to do is define the city. And not by giving it a bunch of weird, hyper-specific details, which is a mistake I've seen a lot of people make, but by defining it on a higher level, giving it a core so that you're able to have all of these details branch off in a more natural way. Just to prove that this is super easy and you're totally able to do it, I'm going to make something up on the fly. So we need to start with some core idea. We'll do something underground is always fun. We'll do a noir city in a cave. Because we're starting with that understanding of genre, we know that we're definitely going to find certain things here, right? And we're not going to find some other things. Because we're defining it as noir, we no longer have this sense of everything exists in this city and I have to flesh out 100 different stores that sell anything the players could want to buy, and I have to flesh out this and this and this. Because it's noir, we know what we need to focus on, which is how the police system works, what, like, different factions of organized crime are there, and the main thing that you need to think about when you're building any noir city is, why does it rain all the damn time? This is not how actual cave ecology works, but it doesn't have to be, 'cause it's fantasy. There's probably like some underground lake underneath it that's like right next to a heat source for some reason. It evaporates, it climbs up the walls, and like drips off all the stalactites, right? Like, you just need a reason for there to be rain, because rain is a thing that exists within that understanding of genre, and within what's left after you've chiseled away everything that isn't noir. When we're deciding on a main ancestry for the city, we don't just want to pick one randomly, right? Because then we have plot elements that don't serve what we're trying to achieve. We want to intentionally pick, I think, 2 ancestries, because we're trying to really serve that theme of noirishness that is sort of the diametric opposition between, like, the 2 worlds, which are law enforcement and organized crime. And maybe a third, which is like the civilians that get caught up in it. Because we've already established that there's some like water here, and this is where you get into like the, rather than storytelling genre side of world building, you get into like the logistics of it. Because we've already established that there's water here, I think using Kutoa could be kind of fun. Often they're presented as like cultish and kind of stupid, but it doesn't really matter what the canon lore is. They're fish people. Their stats are just fish people, and you can make up whatever you need to have them serve the purpose they need to serve in your story. Since the fish people are normally enemies, I think we'll have them be the organized crime. There's something interesting there with like the schools of fish that like kind of just follow one another blindly. I don't know. There's something there. There's something there. Because it's a fantasy world, it's not a race thing, it's a species thing. These are actually 2 entirely separate, like, sides of the city, and there's not really a reason they would mix. So when we're coming up with what we want to do for the police force, and I think also for the civilians, we want to pick someone that's like a higher class, and someone that hangs out in caves. Drow are probably a good choice for this. Spooky gray elves. They live in caves, and are also like very hierarchical, very organized. Anyway, the point is, you can like start with a theme or a genre or an understanding of what you want the city to feel like, and then build outwards and find what the details need to be, and find what's still left in your chunk of marble, rather than just picking things randomly, because if you do that, they're not all going to feed into the theme quite so well. The sun has set. I need to quit getting sidetracked. We've all heard the phrase, characters are not people, right? Or we should have. It's good advice. The point of that is that you shouldn't treat characters like fictional people, because there's infinite complexity in a person that you're never really going to be able to capture in just the bunch of words that are a character. Instead, much like the stupid sculpting metaphor from the beginning of the video, you're supposed to use trope, and you're supposed to use other storytelling techniques to sort of define the negative space around a character, so that we know what they are not, and so we know what they could be. I've had players in the past, and this is pretty common, who have given me a character idea which is just like a list of disconnected personality traits or details or things that have happened in their past, and it's always very difficult for me to sort of feel that as a real character and feel what its thematic relevance to the story may be, because they're not born of a natural expansion of a core idea, but rather this idea that you have to fill in negative space. The best characters are the ones that have a simple but powerful core concept, and then everything that they do feeds back into that core concept in some way. You're able to very quickly, through the use of these like cliches and gimmicks, grasp who a character presents as, and then through some of the details you can sort of glimpse through this like tropey front layer and see what really lays behind that, and that's how you create characters that feel like real people. In the same way, I think that settings and worlds should have that distinction. There is infinite complexity in a world, and if you try to capture that by creating every detail, you're never going to get up to how complex a entire setting, an entire universe really is. Instead, when you define it on this higher level with genres, and with these collections of tropes that you find together, you're able to nail down what a world feels like, and through that you're able to find so many things that may exist within that world. It's really helpful for improv, which means that it's really helpful for D&D, because if you're able to feel a world in this way rather than just plopping details in, then when your players go a place you didn't expect, it's really easy to expand that logic outward and really like fully imagine a place that you didn't even know existed at the beginning of the session that serves the purpose of what they were looking for. I think I'm done. I'm getting better at not rambling. I did go on a little bit of a tangent in the middle of this one, but I hope it was kind of helpful. Bye.